Hello, Botrepreneurs. We are now live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And I'd like to welcome again to the show Hans van Dam. Hi, Hans. How are you?
How I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, great.
It's,
I was looking forward to it again. It's always a pleasure.
and we
Yeah,
had good fun last time. We had quite a few people. We had good questions, so it was a lot of fun.
yeah. We had a lot of positive reactions on that. Yeah, so please tell us your questions during the show. We will try to do this as dynamically as possible. And also, it's always nice to yeah to let know in the comments right now where you're watching from, and maybe you can add if you're a newbie to a conversational or an expert
Yeah.
or a medium.
Like benchmark yourself somewhere in the hierarchy of the
Exactly.
world of conversational AI and ask me anything.
That's right, and maybe Hans will answer. um, yeah. So Hans, maybe you can shortly start with a quick run through of your career so far in the conversational space, so we know where you came from and where you are now.
Yeah, so where I came from is the first like true like chatbot company that I worked at was a CX company, Dutch company that is acquired by CM, which is also a Dutch company.
Yeah.
Um, and I was just doing marketing, but I like learned about chatbots and conversational interfaces, and it was a lot of fun. And it resonated with me because I had a background in writing. Um, and I kind of saw that they were selling their technology and it became more conversational and they didn't really know how to write for it and their clients didn't really know what to do with it. And so I figured I'd focus on that problem a little bit and see what that can turn into. So then we founded a company called RoboCopy, it was called at the time. And we
Yeah.
started out as an agency just with the idea of helping a bunch of people, like a bunch of clients, like create a better chatbot, which I'd been doing freelance. So after the Sears company, I was a freelancer, and then I started RoboCopy together with Olaf Iris, and that was fun. And then we once said like that we trained our own people in our own academy, and it was just Olaf and I. But people started reaching out, and they were like, "Teach us, teach us." So we started teaching people first in workshops, then online, and at one
Hmm.
point we rebranded to Conversation Design Institute, um, which is what we are now. And part of that company is online training and certification. So particularly, so we have a workflow that we teach and certify people on. And it's particularly like enterprises that are building teams, that are scaling teams, that are reaching out to us for help with that. So we will train their employees, and at the same time, we obviously have like individuals that just want to change up their career and learn about the space and advance their lives that way through conversation design. So we're working with them as well. So that's the training side of the business, and now we also have conversation design or CDI services, which is the consulting firm um, that Paul Lewis is now heading up, which is a lot of fun. It's grown really quickly. For us, it was always like, do we still want to do projects and work with clients, or do we just really want to be a
Yeah.
training company? But there was a lot of demand for it, so we're
And
taking that on very seriously now.
cool. Yeah, and I think you now have closed the circle. You can put in practice what you preach and adjust to your own yeah,
Yeah.
findings in the field. That's of course
Yeah, and it's
very
also
good.
we need to do the work to get the feedback to put
Yeah.
it to get that back into the courses. But yes, it's a lot of times like we will have students enroll with us at the same time we're working with clients. Then these clients also say, "Do you have people that you can staff here that we can work with?" And they're like, "Sure." We always look in our alumni community of who's out there, who's available, who's in the right time zone, and then we kind of connect them again with these enterprise clients as well. So yeah, then it's really becoming full circle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think it's the size of the ecosystem is really expanding exponentially right now. Do you agree? Do you have any grasp of how fast we as a whole are growing?
How are we doing as a group?
Yeah,
No, I think we're it's definitely growing, and I think what I like about it is that it's growing in very many directions. So you see more like companies with more deployments. There's more conversational AI technology companies. There's more deployments within these enterprises. There's more interfaces of the virtual beings and the metaverse and voice assistants. But it all people seem to have a pretty good understanding that it's all the same thing. That it's an AI assistant that is interfacing with people via all these different channels and interfaces. So I think that creates that alignment in the industry where everybody's like, okay, we're on this path together, and let's not get too fragmented. Let's all figure out what we're doing. And I think, yeah, you see everybody that's in this space is doing well and is doing interesting work, and
yeah,
it feels like a community.
yeah, exactly. And it's funny that you say it's all basically the same or in the same category, because the Women in Voice group here in the Netherlands recently renamed themselves to Women in Conversational. So they agree with what you said.
Oh,
But
I didn't even
men are
realize that.
allowed, by the way. But so the name is
Men are
still
allowed, yeah.
yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I mean, voice is a tricky name. I think voice in itself is actually a good name because yeah, but it's tricky when you say voice. Some people think smart speakers, some people think interface more broadly, some people think research field, some people think NLU. So whenever you talk to someone and somebody throws out a word like voice, you get first got to figure out, are we talking about the same thing here?
yeah,
Um,
exactly. Because I more think about call bots or call center bots.
oh yeah,
Okay.
exactly that too. So conversational AI seems to be a little bit like the middle ground that everybody understands, kind of like, oh, it's an industry. Where with voice, some people are a little biased towards the smart speaker.
Yeah,
Um, but they also have like companies like Speechly and Alan app that are more saying voice as a UI, right? Or it's like now I just instead of pressing the button, I can just talk to it and making that very easy, where it's not necessarily a conversation. I guess then those companies are like, okay, are they conversational AI companies or are they voice technology companies? And then it gets a little blurry, I guess.
yeah, yeah. And last time it was in September. We also talked about the different kind of roles there are within this area.
Yeah.
So you have copywriting, of course, and then you have the conversation design, and another category would be the AI trainer or the natural language understanding specialist.
Yeah.
Do you see a certain extra or bigger demand for one of those flavors, or?
It's a good question. Well, yeah, so within our workflow, step-by-step process, you sort of identify three different skill sets. And those three different skill sets we call AI trainer, which is, turning data into understanding, it's training the language models, it's using the data to optimize the assistant. Then there's the conversation designer that thinks about, the structure of the conversation, the natural flow, human centricity as part of that. And then there's the copywriter that thinks more about the tone of voice and the personality and behavior design, or the psychology of it. And it's very difficult to find all of those skill sets within one person. So we identify them as different skill sets. And the ratio that we always see now is that 3 AI trainers, 2 conversation designers, and 1 copywriter. So that's kind of the ratio. So if we look at where's the highest demand, um, it's in really good AI trainers that really understand that, because you just need a little more of them. And sort of that copywriter as the editor in chief on a team. It's often, it's like a lot of companies think like, what's the difference between the designer and the copywriter, really? But then, if you let's say you working with like knowledge articles in your organization, and a conversation designer needs to figure out how to turn like 300-word article or 200-word article into a conversation. By the time that you've trimmed it down and structured it in the way that it flows, you've been working with it on it for too long that it's difficult for you to polish it up. So you need that fresh set of eyes to go over it that only thinks about, behavior design. Behavior design is like, what do I want the customer to do now when they read this? About the personality, and that person with that experience that makes the team better adds a lot. But they're really hard to find. And those are the people that often have like a background in screenwriting, creative writing, like old school copywriting. Those people are also very much in demand at large enterprises. So you need to get to a certain level of significance that every word matters to understand why you need those people. So some companies are like, we don't need that person at all. And for others, they're hunting for a year to find someone that can do that properly.
Yeah, right. And I guess also traditional content writers or people that write for the company website sometimes make the shift to conversational, but but I think one of the most important things is then to write less words, use less words, right? With the
fewer
Jenga
words.
and
So the Jenga, for us, it's always like the one breath test. If you write something that you cannot say in one breath, it's too long. And then you do the Jenga technique. You take out the words that you don't really need. And with that, whatever you write, you can take out about 50% of the words. And then you make sure that you have, the conversational mantra, acknowledgement, confirmation, prompt. That you sort of have those components in there. And that's how you structure it. And then it's, only active language, no too many adjectives, keeping it simple. Make it very human centric. Make the reader the hero of the conversation. So whenever you write I, see if you can rewrite that to you.
Yeah, exactly.
I can help you. Yeah, I can help you. That's great. It's like, I can help you. Great, but what do you need help with? That's a much better thing. So try to rewrite all of those. So
it's a special kind of skill, I think, indeed. No questions yet coming in.
No questions.
The LinkedIn audience is quiet. So
LinkedIn audience is quiet. Cannot believe it.
Just if you don't have a question, just let us know where you're watching from. That's always nice to see. I know there are again also people from India, maybe even more to the east. So thank you guys for staying up.
For staying up late,
But maybe they see it now in the replay. But
speaking of like India, we're about to launch a course that we've created together with Haptic out of India, and it's going to be focused entirely on WhatsApp. So how do you develop bots for WhatsApp? What are some of the things to consider with HSMs, and what can and can't you say? And Haptic has a great relationship with WhatsApp, so together we were able to create this, and we've recorded all of it. It's now going through editing, so we should have that live pretty soon.
Oh, that's an awesome extra X hours of education.
Go build your WhatsApp bots.
Exactly. And the certification is also, like you mentioned, one important part of your company. Do people or companies that are looking for someone to join the team, do they really care about certificates?
It's so what's important in this industry is in general, it's the industry was very fragmented initially, and it still kind of is. So what was very important is that we create alignment on methodology, on skill sets, on job titles, etc. And hey, Michael's in the house. Good to see you, Michael. So we needed to develop these standards so that, if we have better design standards, then we increase liquidity in the market. It makes it much easier for people to develop their careers. It makes it easier for these enterprises to hire people and onboard people. It makes it easier for universities to educate their students and stuff. It also makes it easier technology companies, because now they know who's going to be working with it. So the certificate represents that standard. And we see, so the certificate is something that is being looked for. So we know that, for some companies, the certificate is just mandatory. So enterprises, they just say, yeah, we only hire people with a CDI certificate, which we're very thankful for. Others just see it as a very big plus. But yeah, I think like from a student's perspective, it's just great. You can show that you have that skill set and that you know what you're doing. If you look at it from an enterprise perspective, it's great because it makes hiring easier. But it's also, if you look at quality assurance and risk management at an enterprise, having people that are trained and certified in a specific skill set just makes your organization work more efficient. So there's two different lenses to look at the certification program. So yeah, it's definitely something that is sought after. Um, and I think the difference between our certificates, there's other courses where, you can follow a course, at the end of it, you get a certificate. That's like a nice little diploma. I think we are the only certificate that is really becoming that standard for enterprises, that just tells them about a specific workflow and skill sets, kind of like Scrum, right? And Agile. It's like whoever goes near your chatbot or voice assistant just needs to understand this workflow and honor these standards.
Yeah, exactly. I cannot open my LinkedIn timeline without seeing somebody who got her or his certificate. So, yeah, good job there, guys. Yeah. Let's
Thank
see,
you.
because
Let's
yeah,
see. Has there been any interest from EU GDPR to leverage the CDI process? Uh, can you elaborate on that a little bit more, Michael, of how you would, what you're after there? Chat. So
yeah,
what we do
and I think
know is that if you look at data protection and the edge, like, so the workflow is very human centric, right? And that is the key component, where it's not just like, oh, here's an answer to your question, etc. It's like, it's important to understand what people say, but it's much more important for people to feel understood. And I think having people feel understood creates the environment in which you can talk about data. So in that regard, every company that is seriously thinking about data and the relationship between data and their customers and the trust issues that come with that is looking for this human-centric approach, where empathy is very much built into the entire workflow around an assistant.
yeah. So Michael specified a
Mm,
bit. The EU recently issued guidelines for voice-enabled devices.
yeah, I guess then the short answer very much becomes no. We have no officially talked to the EU about these things, but I guess we should actually think about it now.
Yeah, it's a good tip. Leah asked, what are the skills beyond writing that a conversation designer needs to develop to work well with product owners and other roles in large enterprises?
Let's see. What are skills beyond writing the conversation? Oh yeah, I think that's a great question, because oh wow, did you just pop that thing into a
Yeah,
whole
it's
screen?
magic.
That's
Magic.
yeah, that is really cool. Um, yeah, so what we see, a lot of people that with creative backgrounds entering this industry, there it's the first time we're in a scary enterprise environment where there's all these engineers and product managers, and what the hell's going on, and there's these VPs. So what do I need to uh, to deal with that? And one of the first things that we noticed that was very important for us is that you would have, maybe people from customer service or a content team, and they would all of a sudden work on the chatbot. But now they're dealing with engineers that are super clever, that use all these kinds of words that you don't understand. So you would have a conversation, and they would just say a bunch of things that you didn't understand, and therefore you lost the argument. Uh, so we were like, okay, we need to give people a very structured workflow. We need to make them almost like conversation design nerds, where they can be, slap their hand on the table. It's like, no, this is how we do things from a design perspective. We use an acknowledgement, we use a prompt, blah, 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 and we do all these things because it gives them a fair seat at the table. And with that fair seat at the table, being able to articulate what it is that you're doing and why it is important, you're already creating room to then interact with all these stakeholders around you. So I think what are the skills that you need? It's with great confidence articulating what's important about what you're doing, but also very much being able to understand the perspective that they're coming from. Um, so I think if you look about stakeholder management, and I think that's where a lot of these projects die, is that's not being done properly. So where we used to think the designer is right and the engineer is wrong, we now look at the world as they're all holding a piece of the truth and everybody is right. So let's find a way to understand each other and incorporate all of it. So we call it the integral perspective on conversational AI. It's a model we're working on. So I think understanding the context in which you are operating, understanding the perspectives of the engineers, of the managers, and what their targets are and what kind of metrics they need to care about.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at AI training, you're looking at cognition, whereas your manager is looking at NPS, for example. So a lot of times what you're working on is not necessarily the metric that the manager um, is being held accountable for. So you got to understand how all these things work. And I think the skill set that you need for that is actually empathy and being able to listen and being able to articulate why it is, yeah, what it is that you do, why what you do is important. Um, so I think it's a mindset thing that you need to go out there with confidence without being cocky.
Yeah, and
That's
that's you put it very nicely. And I also think it's in most organizations relatively new, this whole conversational part. So yeah, within a couple of
yeah,
years things will be easier and it will be more
yeah,
business as usual. And you
yeah,
recently said on this conversational conference where I saw a live interview you did, or it was semi-live recorded, but you said, yeah, companies have to realize that conversational teams will grow to more or less the same size as their UX teams who are
yeah,
working on the apps or on the websites. So I
yeah,
think that's also a good view on it to know where we're
yeah.
heading. Yeah. And some companies just started a year ago, and others are busy for almost a decade already with conversational. So everybody,
Yeah. So you might think as a designer, oh, this is so stupid that we're not doing that. But you got to understand the bigger powers in play. I like Michael is throwing a lot of cool stuff out there, and I think so the best practices around compliance and principles. So that's one of the things that CDI is very interested in working on with the Open Voice Network that has such an expertise on developing the architecture, developing the privacy and the ethics around it, and trust. So what are the design guidelines for those things specifically? What are the explainable, the design guidelines on explainability and the standards around that and the patterns that people can use. And I think that's something to be discovered. And I think Open Voice Network, together with the CDI Foundation, are two leading organizations to figure that out. And yeah, maybe we should actually talk to the EU more around that. And then there's the one, what industries are interested in the CDI training, and do some of them need it more than others? Um, which is it's an interesting question. What we see traditionally, or it's traditional that customer service heavy operations that reach out to us the most. That's where conversational AI started, right? And it doesn't matter if it's IVR or chat, but if you have a lot of interactions, um, that's when you get serious about conversational AI. And if you get serious about conversational AI, the experience around that becomes incredibly important, right? The more conversations you have, the better they should be. So yeah, if you got a lot of volume there, that's when you that's when you get serious. So it's banks, it's telcos, it's insurance companies, the usual suspects. And now, we see health as a big player here. That's getting more and more important.
Yeah.
Health is also kind of a tricky one because they always feel that everything's special in health. So if you don't add the word health to it, then they don't bite, as to say. But no, I think just traditional customer service heavy operations, regardless of vertical, but it's banking, telco, insurance companies, retail. Um, those are the ones.
Yeah. Energy. Don't forget energy.
Oh yeah, energy company. Yeah, yeah. I think every chatbot company runs on energy companies, right?
Yeah, true. But I think
Uh,
a difficult thing is also to decide. Okay, we now have enough. We have a minimum viable bot to go live. When have you reached this point? And yeah, you cannot wait for it to become perfect because you will never reach that same level. I think of perfectionist like you can with a website or an app.
yeah,
So
that's
you have
true.
to let go at a certain point and
Yeah.
throw it out there, right? And just start and look at the data coming in.
Yeah, I mean, perfection is for losers. That's always, I like that line where it's just before you know it, you're gonna waste so much time and
Yeah,
effort trying to get that perfect thing, and particularly with conversational AI, which is an ever-changing interaction. There's no point to making it perfect. And I think every company has so much to gain by actually just getting to standard best practices. Once we're there, then we can start looking into uh, perfection. But then, and this ties into the next question of Michael, uh, instead of it's more interesting to start looking at more deployments or multilingual issues. Deploying more languages, deploy more countries, deploy on more interfaces. The value that you get there, if you go there to baseline level of best standards, you're gonna make so much savings that perfecting that initial chatbot doesn't really matter. So the way we look at multilingual stuff, and I think it's an interesting question. There's multilingual and multi cultural, right? So if you look at persona, personality, the character behind your AI assistant, you want to look at the way to develop a persona is to what extent are we technically capable of automating conversations? What are the types of conversations that we're going to be automating? Who are we going to be having these conversations with? And then who's best to do that on our behalf, right? And that's your bot persona, and it's often based on maybe you're the best employee that you can think of, or maybe it's a brand ambassador, or maybe it's the CEO, maybe it's the intern. Could be anything, but you need a character that describes, that sort of gives, uh, creates the vocabulary in a way, right? So when the
yeah,
design team thinks of like how to write this, they should be thinking, how would our bot persona actually say this?
yeah,
Now, if you work in multiple countries, then you have, a lot of times what happens is that you have your main persona, and then you have your localized versions of it. So if you think about the Google Assistant, the US Google Assistant is a different US assistant or assistant than the one in the Netherlands. So in the Netherlands, we don't like hierarchy. Going up or going down. We just don't like it. Everything's equal. So in tone, the Google Assistant in the Netherlands is different than the one in the US, than in the one in Denmark, than the one in the UK,
and
and everyone
Japan
else.
is super polite, probably.
Yeah, it's super polite. So if we say, if we describe the values as we are open and respectful, with a bit of humor, those could be our core values, but that might mean something different in Japan than in Thailand, than in Argentina, right? So what happens a lot of times is you will have, if you have an enterprise, you have your global team, and at your global team, you have your expert designers and copywriters and AI trainers. They create like the core corpus of what's happening in the organization, and then that goes to the localized teams. So you might have like a bunch of designers at a headquarters somewhere, and then they want to create the German version. Then Germany will have a team that sort of takes those initial designs and then starts to localize it. So we don't like translators because just translating, that doesn't convey the values that you would want to have in there. So these people need to be trained in conversation design as well and understand the principles that have been created. So a lot of times, just it's so subtle, some of the things that are in there, particularly if you use like behavior design, where which we're big fans of and that we teach a lot. Where we might say something, we might say, okay, for social proof, like most young families select this package. And that's a great message because if I have a young family, then I think that's for me, right? So when I give that to a different country and a different team, they just need to know that we need social proof here, right? They need to understand what social proof
Yeah.
is, and then they can sort of create their own social proof message for their localized tone of voice within their language, and that's how you deploy that. So that's how kind of how we look at that international thing from CDI's perspective. But you also have companies that have their entire different deployments, and it's very messy. But if you would have like one big operation.
Yeah, especially if your business processes are the same in several countries, you can save a lot of money to centralize that core, like you described, I guess.
Yeah, because a lot of times so if you look at the NLU model, it's trained in English, right? So that whatever comes in gets translated to English, and that gets matched to the intent. So you get the English message back, and then it just selects the German variation if it's a German, right? So it's the core of the NLU and the operation runs in English. There's just an extra step in the translation.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm thinking about entities and synonyms and stuff like that, but it's an interesting topic. Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to get the scale, there's a few ways to scale, and that is more deployments and more languages and more integrations. And those are like the three ways that all contribute to increasing the number of conversations that you're automating. And as you grow that number, you want to start thinking about improving the experience gradually as you go along as well. So you don't need the most advanced design principles when you're just doing a POC in a local market with a voice assistant that hardly anyone's going to talk to. But if that proves its value and more managers want to do more and it grows, then you start adding more designers and more advanced stuff. Like
Yeah,
do
and
the first.
then the HR company wants an internal bot and IT as well, and
Yeah.
before you know it, you have more requests than you can handle. And do you know any great examples of bots that really offer personalized answers based on the client that is talking to the bot, if it's a verified user, of course?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a verified user, it's more, but it's very, it just comes from the database. So it's like, how many vacation days they'll have left, right? And then you get those answers. Like there's a lot of those out there.
Yeah, but also B2C, maybe. Like what you said, this is perfect for young families and stuff like that.
Yeah, not on the marketing stuff as much, but a lot of times um, you can fake a lot of personalization. And I think companies aren't really aware of that. So there's a lot of problems that we think we should solve through technology, or actually we should seek to solve them through empathy. Um, it's similar with, you have insurance companies that say, can we use sentiment analysis to check how people are feeling when they reach out? If your car is stolen, people are upset. They're angry. If they reach out because their phone broke, they're upset. It's customer service. You don't need sentiment analysis for those things. And I think it's a lot with these types of things as well. If I'm a brand with a young audience, I know 80% of my customers are young families. I just say, you win some, you lose some. So
Yeah.
there's, let's
Okay.
see, let's
And
see here, human in the
Michael.
loop. Yeah, well, I mean, you always have humans in the loop. So I'm not sure what the sure is in response to it, but I think human in the loop is always an important one. So we never a dead end street, right? So uh, there is the long tail of design. So you want 80% of the people to go through 20% of the conversational path, and the rest you hand off, right? So I'm a restaurant. It's if someone wants to book a table for 4 people at 8 o'clock, then our assistant should be able to handle that.
Mhm.
But if there are 13 of them and 2 of them have a nut allergy, and 3 of them are gluten free, they should just give us a call. Or so when the bot identifies that, it should just hand over immediately. It should hand over. Like, I think people always need to be in the loop in terms of training the AI assistants, making sure people have a good experience, and monitoring the whole thing and making it better, and making sure you increase NPS and satisfaction, etc. But also for people to always interact with customers. And I think, well, the misconception around services that the AI assistance is making the service agent obsolete. It's the other way around. It makes their job much more fun and
Yeah.
easier, right? It's now you actually have time to talk to people and solve more complex issues. So um,
Yeah, and the
you
bot can
always need,
handle the repetitive stuff. That's relatively
yeah,
simple, of course.
yeah. So when stuff gets more complicated, you want to follow company policy. And I like that you say that, where it's company policy, because one of the certificates that we are also exploring, and maybe we should actually work on this together a little bit, Michael, is um, to sort of have a compliance officer, to sort of have someone on the team that just knows, how to, embed all of these things to make sure that the assistant is following the protocols, but also that the handovers are following the protocols and the agents are saying the right thing around these issues as well. So we sort of see two new certificates of growing the team, or maybe they should just be extra certificates for people that are already on the team. But you're going to have your ethics and inclusion certificate to make sure that that is deeply embedded in everything that you do around an AI assistant, um, and one for the technical side of that around compliance and security, which is really a step-by-step process. What are all the stamps of approval that I need to get, and what are all the things that need to be in place in this entire ecosystem, that I think is also just going to be a very important role going forward.
Michael has another question about how mature are conversation design tools. What capabilities do you look forward to them adding in the next 3 years?
Yeah, with the tools, there's a lot of things happening, right? You see them built be much, really, like voice flow on top of Rasa. So you sort of see, like, you've got some of these platforms that are becoming more technical, and the design tools are becoming deeper integrated with it. And that is really cool because it just makes everything more open and flexible, and easier to work with. But Voxable is also doing something cool where they now have GPT-3 inside of the design tool that helps you with creating the utterances, just suggestions for training phrases, but also the suggestions for what you might want to write as a designer.
Mm.
And I think, like, right now, 80% of the work in AI assistance is people configuring everything. And gradually, it's, AI is going to configure more and more and write more and more. And the role of the designers is got to make sure that that is being done, compliant with our policies and in the tone of voice and around and in a way that is trustworthy. So I think if you look at the design tools, like, whoever is going to understand that trend, that eventually the people are only going to be writing 20% of it, maybe, but that 20% is so much more important than the 80% that they're now writing. Because if you have automated systems, if you have GPT-3 or other big language models, generate text that is going to talk with your customers. And if you're a company, that your customers are the most valuable thing that you have and the most valuable relationship that you have. If you're going to have an automated system interact with that, then the fine tuning of that and the monitoring of that is going to be crucial. So whoever is going to transition their conversation design toolkits into that direction that understands that is, I think, in a very good spot. And it's something I look forward to. We always get that question. It's like, aren't you afraid that AI is then going to take, like, the robot is now taking the job of the customer service agent, but will AI soon take the job of the conversation designer? No,
No.
but it's going to change. It's going to change over time. So the tools around that also need to change.
Yeah, exactly. And indeed, a lot of very interesting startups are building some great businesses around platforms like Qbox, which you partnered up with. And
Yeah.
we today had a demo of humanfirst.ai. Yeah, you
Uh,
should also check that one out. Maybe you already
yeah.
did.
Yeah.
But
Like the.
a lot of great stuff. But maybe we can focus a little more on what people can and should do when they really start off in the conversational AI space. Because
Yeah.
last time we concluded that you have to start building a bot because you can read about it and do a training, but you have to build it, I think, to really
Yeah.
get the feel of it, right?
Yeah, I think so too. It's like build a bot, use a prototyping tool and build something, and then go into Dialogflow or Rasa and build something and interact with it and have other people interact with it. So yeah, get yourself skilled up, build a portfolio, and the way to build a portfolio is just by creating cool stuff and have people interact with it and learning how to build stuff that is very terrible. And if it's so bad that you don't want people interacting with it, have people interact with it, because that's when you're going to learn the most. So
Yeah,
yeah, build the portfolio, get skilled up, and become part of the community. Last time we did this session, I remember somebody was like looking for a job. I don't remember what the interaction was, but he's working for us now. Like so it's still a small industry. So go into all these meetups and being part of the open dialogue.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. You mean Oliver, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
Oliver's with us now,
we
so he's
almost had two jobs during the live broadcast to choose from.
no, so I think those are really the steps. Become part of it, and be very open. Like everybody in this community is very open and approachable.
Yeah,
So also be curious and open and approachable. There's no there's no right or wrong. Don't try to defend things too much that you've come up with. Like everybody's figuring it out,
yeah.
and support the things that are working,
But of
because
course,
there's no competition yet, right? I think that's kind of the thing. It's like whoever now thinks of something that works, it's great. Get behind it, support it, because it's not going to cut into whatever you're already doing.
no, but it's of course scary to put your bot out there because you think, oh my God, the first questions it will answer, it will not
Yeah.
regret, it will
I,
not
I
understand.
I guess that's a good thing. Have very good repair messages for and have fun personal. Yeah. So when you build something that's really bad, have a lot of personality content around it for your fallbacks and your error handling. So even if you can only answer one question, then the rest is kind of out of scope. And for all of
Small
those
talk.
out of scope, you just have small talk. And then you create a fun experience and start with friends and families first, obviously.
Yeah, I also have another trick because I started with screencast videos where I only showed the part that I wanted to show, and not so it could not derail. And later
Yeah.
on, I was confident to put stuff out there.
Yeah, I mean, it always derails, but there's a few things you can anticipate. You just need to anticipate that it's going to derail, and you need to work within the limitations of the technology. And it's much more important that people feel understood than that you actually understand what they're saying. So a lot of times, just train your model for the future. Like if you only understand three things, then the rest of it you don't understand. Just have an answer for it and a few variations with some personality contents, and then you can hack together a very rich experience, which is pretty thin in and of itself. That usually tends to work pretty well. I like the other question that Michael has on how soon until developers will be able to design a conversational application by only using their voice. I mean, I think that's actually pretty simple to do, but it's one of those things where typing is just still quicker. Because you can write the dialogue, but then you're forced to say it in one go. So that you end up editing with your fingers eventually. Um, but you know, more and more NLU is being used for programming software, where you can say, "Oh, I want people to now create an account and do this and that and that." So you should be able to do that with voice as well. So I
Yeah,
think technology is there.
also business intelligence applications are now, yeah, you can command them with conversational techniques, like give me the report of Q3 compared to last year and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
and I
it's
guess
great.
also within that is like a conversational application. If we look at voice voice UI and sort of in the way that Speechly and Alan are doing, uh, it's obviously very simple when you create an app and you're like, people should also be able to talk to this button. And let's create some training phrases. Well, these are like you can like say out loud these training phrases. Those would be kind of neat things. And I think it's not that complicated, but nobody has built a dedicated solution to that yet. And I don't think the viability of that solution is, something that I would now put a lot of energy into. I guess that.
No, no. But yeah, about unhappy paths, yeah, the training material you guys have put out there, there's a lot of focus on that because, yeah, the happy path is relatively simple to get back to that.
Yeah, yeah, that's like the happy path is yeah. So I think designing a voice through the happy path is very simple, but most people don't go down the happy path. That's like saying, oh, you go to high school, you go to college, you get a job, you get married, you have kids, and then you retire and you've had the most happy life. That's like the happy path. But how many
Yeah,
people really go down that path in one celebratory journey? And
yeah,
Nika, I think that's great too. Also a fan of the community. Nika pops up everywhere, or I
yeah,
guess we
yeah.
should say in English. Should we say Nike in English? Uh,
Nike van Heeswijk.
yeah.
Yeah,
Uh, but yeah, it is so wonderful. And somehow the Netherlands seems to be pretty vocal in the industry. Very few people, but they're very active.
yeah, I got that compliment for us as a nation as well from German colleagues. Yeah,
Wow, that's
they
great.
cannot
I
go to
like,
any conference and they see Dutch people speaking and showing up and stuff.
yeah, maybe we just like the stage. Maybe it's an ego problem. Uh, I like this one. How do you deal with situations where your ethical concerns clash with your
Yeah,
customers' choices?
good luck
Um,
with that one, Hans.
well, I guess there are so many. You can do this very broad, obviously, but if a so let's figure out an example here. So a customer wants to do something, uh, but you as a company don't think that they should because you do not ethically think that that is the right thing. So a very simple request would be you talk to an energy company, you say, I'd like to buy some cocaine, and then the energy company says, I'm sorry, I can't help with that. You can ask me questions about your electricity bill. So I guess it's like how far can you push it? I think it in general is more about you know explaining the scope and your beliefs, kind of like who are you as a company and what do you believe in and what do you stand for and how do you articulate that well. And I think whoever does not agree with your philosophy might not be a customer for you. Um, so that's saying no is fine. with any type of request, and I don't think that is limited to conversational AI. Somebody, if every bad restaurant or every good restaurant that has a bad customer has the option to ask a customer to leave, and I think that that's totally fine. So I think it's more about how do you build ethics into a conversational experience from the ground up, because it cannot be an afterthought. So how do you make sure you are inclusive in your speech and in how you respect people's linguistic preferences? How do you make sure that there is diversity embedded in the team? Um, and if your team is a mirror of your customer base and a society as a whole, then you will make sure that that those things are embedded in the experience. So I think maybe your question is also going into that direction, and we were just playing around with it a little earlier. But I think that is what you need to figure out. I mean, if you put four white guys in a room, they're going to create a chatbot that's going to be very good for four white guys, or for white guys in general.
Yeah. So ethics by design, right?
Ethics by design, having a very diverse group of people on your team, and have that ethics officer in there. So we're also launching a course with the Alan Turing Institute on ethics entirely, and we'll have a certification program. So on the last Conversation Design Festival, we had Cami Rincon from the Alan Turing Institute and Phil Harvey, who's at Microsoft. And they're both developing courses with us now, and that together will be the ethics certification, or the ethics certificate. So the learnings from that is really, data, empathy, understanding, and respecting people.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so
Michael came up with an example, like an HR bot, and somebody wants to know from the bot if Hans has a girlfriend. Yeah, but I think if you have time in your team to handle all this stuff in your bot, then you must have a perfect bot already, because there's so much other work to do, of course. But
I think the question here is, so if the policy exists, if there is a guideline within the company, then the people on the people in the chatbots team, it's their responsibility to understand and check with the guidelines that exist, right? And make sure that that is within the chatbot. On the other hand, if that guideline does not exist, is it the responsibility of the chatbot team to develop that guideline, or do they then need to go to someone in the organization and says, this seems to be a sensitive issue, we need to have a bunch of wise people in the room here to have an opinion on this? So if there is guidelines, you need to comply with them. If there's things that you feel should have guidelines, you should flag them.
Yeah, exactly. And what we do at Ascent is we took 2 agents. They help us out like part-time. So they still work on the phone line and the web chat, but they also are in the conversational team, and it's a great asset, because they really know what's going on and what can be said and promised and not. So I think that's a way to go. And Mika, I guess you emulate how a human agent of this same company would respond.
Yeah, well, and I think that is like so key part in our workflow is to actually, we always say, mentalize the conversation. So kind of understand what's going on, what's the context of this conversation, how's the customer looking at this, or the employee, what do they want to know, what motivates them, what are their anxieties, what do they expect, and then so you want to you mentalize the conversation, then you have the conversation, and you role play the conversation, right? So one person plays the assistant and the other person plays, the human. So in this case, an employee that wants to ask certain information. During that conversation, you will feel what is crossing the line a little bit, right? So if you have a diverse group of people working on the assistant, and 2 people are role playing it a little bit, and you have different perspectives in the room, then you are going to flag what doesn't work. So if somebody asks, like, hey, does Hans have a girlfriend? that's like somebody will be like, yo, that's not cool. So I think that is kind of embedded there, and I think, yeah, having that be part of it, and a lot of times, if engineers know that they have information, it's possible, it's a cool engineering trick, and they get excited about building it, and rightly so. Uh, but yeah, then somebody needs to be like, yo, can't do that.
Yeah, you have to have that supervision.
Yeah, but I like, I think what Michael's getting at, and I think it's a good. I'd love to have a longer chat on that, and I still need to read Michael's paper. I said that a couple days ago to him that I would.
Yeah, it's a
I
very
think,
interesting topic.
yeah, I think maybe the core thing is whose responsibility is it to develop the guidelines, and if they're not there, should the conversational AI team develop them, or like
You don't.
I don't know the answer, but it's a very interesting debate. And I think as conversational AI gets bigger, more of that responsibility will be in conversational AI. Because if it's going to be the most dominant interface, then the people working around that interface are going to have more say.
Mhm.
But right now, if you look at the reality of these teams, they're very small. They have a lot of issues already to solve. So they need to be able to go to someone else for this issue. They need to flag it, or they need to check if they comply with it. And it needs to be somebody else's problem, because if you now put this in a tiny team that's just trying to get a chatbot to work, then your whole project's going to tank as well. So it's like, how do you bring in the responsibilities over time as the operation matures? Um,
Yeah, exactly.
that's definitely like an interesting thing. So there's, if you look at this from the integral perspective, it's like having people with, a responsible mindset to develop this, and having people, with the skill set to handle this and to do the checks and but that particularly have the system in place that that develops the protocol, and
Yeah,
having a culture around it that, honors these things and makes it, puts it in the heart of the operation rather than it being an afterthought.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, the hour is already over, so
Really?
I think we should wrap up a bit. Yeah, you briefly mentioned the festival you guys are organizing.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we did a festival a couple months ago, and it was really cool. We did 14 hours of streaming. I was dead at the end of it. We
Yeah.
did 14 hours, and we had more than 355 people online for more than 8 hours.
Wow.
So we had like more and more people throughout the day. We had 350 people throughout 8 hours plus. And this year we're going to do it again. So we're gonna have Phil Harvey again. We're gonna have Elizabeth Stoku, the linguist. We're gonna have a data philosopher. Probably gonna have the Turing Institute again. Um, we're gonna have talks by just a lot of cool people. So we're
And
gonna be learning from some enterprises that are doing the work. We're gonna learn from designers. We're gonna learn from AI trainers. We're gonna learn more about the ethical side of it.
at
And
the
we're gonna do some
hackathon, right?
workshops. And we're gonna do some hackathon, yeah. So we're gonna do a Slackathon with our friends at Salesforce. That should be fun. VoiceFlow is doing a session. That's gonna be fun. Um, there's a few others that are pending. We have a magician. That's gonna be cool.
Yeah.
And we have a special appearance by a secret. Yeah, I can't say the name yet, but I will tell you that there's a person from the Netherlands that does a lot with breathing, and deep breathing particularly, and that loves cold water.
Mm,
And because we figured we're going to do another marathon, and we're going to do, probably 16 hours, because we want people from India and Europe and the
yeah.
US to see as much as they can. So we're going to do a big energizer, and we're going to bring in someone very famous, hopefully, to guide us through that and re-energize us at a certain point. And obviously, we'll have some speakers from Open Voice Network as well, our good friends. And Voice Lunch is going to be part of it. So should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's on November 30th.
Yeah, November 30th. Yeah. And we'll start making a lot of noise very soon.
Yeah,
I think
cool.
Barend even has like a little code, a link underneath this video.
It should be there. There's a discount in the discount code in the link. And if it's not there, I will post it in a couple of minutes. Yeah, I also wanted to announce that since a couple of weeks, there's the website Botrepreneurs.live, and there you can see the upcoming interviews and also some playbacks of old interviews. And I'm also hosting a networking event, an online networking event, so you can sign up for that as well. And in November next month, we have Rasa on the show, so about the open source conversational AI. And in December, I have Sasha Walter, also a friend of the Botrepreneurs. He worked at Amazon Alexa and later Cognigy, and now works for the German railways. So that's will be a very interesting talk about how to design convincing conversational experiences. So, oh, and I forgot, I also have a discount for you guys on the training material of Hans.
You just keep giving it away. It's like the
Institute.
Oprah Winfrey show. You get a coupon. You get a coupon.
Yeah, under your seat. Yeah. So I want to thank you, Hans, again for making time for us, and thanks to the viewers and to the people who asked questions. It's always nice to have a dynamic show, and yeah, looking forward to see you all again soon. So
yeah, see you November 30th.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Bye bye, everybody.